Well, hello and welcome back. I am Ramy Romani, your iFit guide, and we are here in Luxor, Egypt, right inside the Karnak Temple, the biggest house of worship and the longest lasting in the whole world. Through this next workout, I'm going to take you to the secret spots in Karnak Temple. I'm going to show you things that you've never heard of before and very few people know of. So let's go. The first thing you see in Karnak Temple is the Sphinx Avenue, ram-headed sphinxes that are flanking the road. And the reason behind them is nothing more than protection and greatness. You walk into the temple with the protection of the ram-headed sphinxes, and every ram-headed sphinx would have a little statue underneath of them. If you look right there, there's a little statue underneath every ram-headed sphinx that has the king and the name of the king and who built it. Because the idea with all these ram-headed sphinxes is that most kings come together to build them. This place is the most important place in ancient Egypt. For them, they started building it, starting the Middle Kingdom, all the way through till the end of the New Kingdom, and even all the way through Alexander the Great and his Ptolemide era. This place was used as a house of worship for more than 2,200 years. 2,200 years, that's the longest lasting practical house of worship than any other place in the world. I mean, think about it. The Vatican was built about 500 years ago. This place was used more than 4 times that. And it is huge. And the idea with it is that it started with a little temple. And remember, this is the east side of the Nile. This is the side of the living. This is where everyone actually comes and prays. And it's a massive temple. If you look, try to look all the way up. We're walking through the first pylon, the first gate of the temple. That pylon is at least 32 meters high. That's more than 100 and some feet high. And it was all about greatness in this temple. So many kings came together. It started with a little temple, grew. Every king comes, they add their own addition. This pylon is Nectanebus the first, who comes all the way towards the end of after the New Kingdom. His name was Nectanebus. And the idea is that every king signs his name on this place. And because it's the first pylon, it is the last king. So it kept expanding. It was so small, it kept expanding onwards and sideways. If you see an overhead of this temple, you will see that it wasn't designed to start to grow that far. And then there are secrets that are hidden within the walls of this temple. Something really special happened here about 20 or 30 years ago. This pylon was also 100 some feet high pylon, and it was built with a king named Hormahib. Hormahib comes 2 kings after King Tut. And then recently, in the modern recent years, an earthquake hits this temple, a really strong earthquake. And the earthquake brought this pylon down. And when the pylon was brought down, we found stuff inside the pylon that revealed a secret of ancient Egypt that we never knew of. When the pylon came down, inside here, and it's going to be tricky to see, but all the way inside the pylon, inside the walls of the temple, we found pieces, bits and pieces of another temple that are hiding here, that were used as the stuffing stones of this temple. So here's what happened. King Tut's father was a king that was called the rebel king. He was a king that came in and decided that all the gods of ancient Egypt don't matter. There's only one God that matters. And that's the God, the power behind the solar disk. The power behind the solar disk. He was closest to what religions believe in today. Akhenaten is known to be the first monotheistic leader in the whole world. He invented monotheism. But the priests of ancient Egypt didn't like that. The priests of ancient Egypt felt threatened by that. You have to understand the relationship between the priests and the kings of ancient Egypt. Think today, or even in the medieval times where the Pope was really strong. The Pope can control the king sometimes. The high priests here are extremely important, really strong figures. They can control the people, they have massive influence on the people, and the kings use those priests to help him control the land. So when the priests are unhappy, there are problems. And by Akhenaten saying all these gods don't matter, and only the god behind the solar disk matters, you lose that very important priest situation, and they lose their jobs. They don't matter. He's basically telling all the priests they don't matter. Anyway, it caused a big ruckus. We're about to go into one of the most glorious, the most glorious rooms, places in the temple of Karnak. This is the Hypo style hall. It's not just one corridor of pillars. There's endless pillars on this side, endless pillars on that side, and every single one of them tells a story. Look right here. Uzer ma'atra sitip in Ra. That's inside the cartouche. That's the name of King Ramesses, one of the strongest kings, or at least claims to be the strongest kings of Egypt. He built all this side of pillars to show how strong he is. Remember, every king gets his own addition, and he gets to decide what addition he does to his Vatican, the Karnak Temple. And he wanted, Ramesses II specifically, wanted to add right here a wall that explains his campaigns, his battles, and right in here he explains one of the most important successes of his life, a battle called the Kadesh battle with the Persians. And in the Kadesh battle, he puts him winning, and he wrote on the walls that I destroyed the enemy, I hung the enemy from the head, I won this battle so strongly, and they fled away. And we know from it that Ramesses II was strong, he destroyed the enemy, and Egypt survived. Now when we went over into Persia and looked on their walls, apparently the king of the Persians claims that he on the walls too, that he destroyed Ramesses, that he killed Ramesses, that he won that war. So, since history has been written by the winners for the longest time, we really might never know what actually happened. But we know that after that war, there was a peace treaty between Ramesses II, between the Egyptians and the Persians. So it's very likely that they actually came to an agreement. The best time to come to Karnak Temple is with a sunrise. The sunrise is right in the center of the hall hallway, and you have to think back in time on the big days, the big praying days in Egypt, on the harvesting festivals, on the flood festivals. Everyone in ancient Egypt would come here to pray. It was known that everyone when they come, they had to bring some type of offering, and one of the most common offering was animal mummies. They would give animal mummies to the gods as offerings. So there were animal mummies salesmen outside of the Karnak Temple, all sitting with their big pots selling a bunch of animal mummies. Later on, we discovered a place here in Karnak Temple with a big hall that is filled with little bird mummies, cat mummies, that were all offerings. We opened them, we opened the inside of them, and half of them had nothing inside. It looked like a bird mummy and had nothing inside. So even ancient Egypt had little scam artists standing outside selling people some fake animal mummies so they can make a dime. Now I'm bringing you here because I'm going to turn you around and show you one of the most impressive obelisks in the temple. This right here is an obelisk for King Thutmose I. King Thutmose I was a king of the New Kingdom, and he was the husband of Queen Hatshepsut. Queen Hatshepsut was a very famous queen in ancient Egypt, and she has a long story. She was the first female king of Egypt, and she called herself specifically that because she can't call herself a queen. A queen is just the wife of the king, but she ruled Egypt herself. She was the first female to rule Egypt, and she decided to make an obelisk even bigger than her father's. Look at that one right there. This on record is actually the biggest obelisk in the world, and it's about 120 feet high, and her name is all over it. And on it, she actually tells the story of how she built that obelisk and how she broke all the records by building that obelisk. On that obelisk, Hatshepsut herself claims that she made this obelisk in less than 7 months. She made the obelisk that is bigger than any other obelisk in the temple. She herself wanted to say that she broke all the records to prove that a woman can beat a man in records. Back at the time, that was extremely important. Going back to Akhenaten's story, he decided to leave all these priests. Remember, he decided there's only one God. It's the God behind the solar disk. He decided to all leave these priests behind. Priests were unhappy, and there was a divide in the country. And that's in the beginning of the New Kingdom, one of the strongest kingdoms of ancient Egypt, if not the strongest. He decided to do that, and the priests were not happy. The divide started in the country. The divide was so bad that Akhenaten decided to leave. There were many followers for Akhenaten, and he decided to leave the country, take his followers with him, and go all the way north to find a new place. And he was so rebel that he decided to put the tombs on the east bank, to claim that there are no need for priests, to say that he is the only one that can hear God. So he would go up and talk to his God and come back down and tell the people what happened, tell his followers what happened. And he would go and claim that there are rules. And he found that city, he called it Amarna, and on the walls of Amarna, he said, this is the promised land. The promised land. Now that story is very similar to a biblical story, the story of Moses. Both believed in one God, both had followers, both left Egypt at the time, which was Thebes. Thebes was the capital of Egypt, and even till today, any capital of Egypt, which Cairo is today, we call Cairo Egypt. So if I'm in Luxor today and say I'm going back to Cairo, anyone in Egypt would say I'm going back to Egypt. So they left the capital of Egypt and they went north into the desert. They crossed the Nile, both crossed some form of water. And in the record, everyone believes it's the Red Sea, but that is actually a misinterpretation. It doesn't ever claim that it was the Red Sea. In Hebrew, the word is Reed Sea, Yom Shao, Reed Sea. So it could have been the Nile. They both crossed the Nile. They both found the promised land. They both were the only ones that could speak to their God and tell their followers what happened. So there's very similar parts of that story. Anyway, the priests of ancient Egypt, the priests of Amen at the time, were very angry with Akhenaten. They came back and they decided to destroy every part of that city and bring Akhenaten's son and play smart politics. Akhenaten's son at the time was King Tut. They brought him back to Luxor, Thebes, and they made sure that he changes his name. King Tut's name was Tut Ankh Atun. King Tut Ankh Atun, which is, Atun is the other god, the god behind the solar disk. They made him change his name to King Tut Ankh Amen. Now his new name after he came back says that he is the one in the horizon of God Amen, not God Eaten, which is a massive difference. This part of the temple is a very sacred part. It was built by a king who liked collecting so many different animals from around the world and bringing them back, exotic animals. And each now and then you will see some exotic animal on the wall. This is called the Botanical Garden. Thutmose III was a king that liked, if you look at the walls here, there are different animals that we never see on ancient Egyptian walls. Animals that he brought from Asia when he went, animals that he brought after wars and trades, and even different type of flowers that we've never seen on ancient Egyptian walls. All over this area, look, there are duck, geese, different type of birds, a huge collection of animals that are right in this spot, and it shows at the time how trade was extremely important. You look at that. Like, I don't even know what this animal is right here with the horns. It looks like a cow, but it's different. It's so delightful. Now look at his temple pillars too. Those pillars were very special. He, you know, every ancient Egyptian king or queen or prince liked to make their temples or tombs in the same way they like to live. And those temples and tombs were built in the same shape but would last forever. So this is built of stone, but it takes the shape of his tent, what is it called? The stake, yeah, the tent stake. So if you look at the pillar, it looks like a tent stake because that's how he liked to live. Now all around this temple, there are bits and pieces of it that have little stories like that. So they brought King Tut back, and when they brought King Tut back, they changed his name, they changed his wife's name. This is a beautiful part of the temple. So this is the end of this temple on this side, the northern side, the eastern side. And when you look at this temple, this is the beginning of the temple. So the temple grew closer to the Nile, and then when there was not enough space, it grew further that way too. But each now and then, you could see there are bits and pieces of color that is still remnants. Look at that. There's color right here, the red colors. They're still alive. In ancient Egypt, all the pigments came from natural material, like fruits and vegetables. Look at that, red pigment is still there. It's absolutely terrific. And this was a place for Thutmose III, made of limestone. King Tut came back, and after he came back, he changed his name. They made him change his wife's name, and it's really unknown whether he changed his name or they made him change his name. This time period, there was so much motivation going on that we don't actually know what happened. But at the end of King Tut's time, he died 6 years later, and they wiped the memory of Akhenaten. They wiped it so bad that there was a temple of Akhenaten that Akhenaten added to Karnak Temple that they completely destroyed, broke into little pieces, and used it to build another pylon. That pylon was the pylon that I showed you at the beginning of this workout that fell apart during an earthquake, and within that pylon we found the remnants of Akhenaten's temple, which is absolutely glorious, right? How an earthquake can be the best archaeologist, because we would have never broken into archaeology to try to find some other secret, but an earthquake did that for you. Let's jump on top of this temple here and get into one of my favorite little temples in Karnak Temple. So if you look up here, look how much colors are still alive up here. This part, look how much colors are still here. This is so much hidden away from the sun that, look at the ceiling too, that the colors are still in this temple. It survived for over 3,000 years. And you have to understand that this is a place that is really used. Here's a really cool mantle with the colors on the gate. That this place was used for 2,000 some years. Everyone was touching the walls. It is very rare to actually see colors that are still in this temple. Now I'm going to take you with me and go where you're not really allowed to go, but I have friends. I'm trying to reach a little temple that was dedicated to a special god. That temple makes me love the ancient Egyptian stories and mythology. We look back again at Hatshepsut's obelisk from right here, and all the records she listed on it that she broke. She was one of the strongest female, well, she's the only female king of Egypt at the time. This obelisk, she attempted to make it from gold, to make that obelisk actually from gold. But she settled, if you look at the top of the obelisk now, this was covered with a substance called electrum. Electrum was a substance that is made with a mixture of silver and gold, and it's meant to shine. In a normal day, normal sunny day, that obelisk would have shined so strongly all over the place that the top of it would look like rays of light coming from the center of the temple. It's a bit harder to reach that little temple that I want you to come with me. Be careful over here. Do a little jump. The gods of ancient Egypt. This area of the temple is between the two walls. Remember, I told you this temple was never designed to end up this way. So you could find so many alleyways in it that are between two different walls of the temple. But Hatshepsut's obelisk was once covered, surrounded by other sandstone material and mud, and had other names of other kings listed on it, specifically Thutmose III, who was her stepson, who was supposed to be the king and didn't like it, came back and destroyed her memory. And around that obelisk, he built a long wall of mud brick and listed his name all over it instead of Hatshepsut's name. Now, this seemed to have happened often in ancient Egypt, right? The guy that built his wall from another guy's temple, stuffed the temple pieces inside the wall so no one sees them. An earthquake comes, we figured it out. Hatshepsut's obelisk gets covered, it falls apart. This is all important because by covering their name, they know that they wiped them from history. And history is extremely important for ancient Egyptians. Obviously, look around you. They wanted to list every part of their history on the walls so we can learn it. By wiping away someone's history, they wipe away his memory, they wipe away his future. This is delightful too. If you look up here, there's a battle with all the chariots and King Seti I, who was Ramesses' father. This is a really important figure here. Holds the king of the enemy with a smiter in his hand all the way up here. Look at that. Holds the king and all his sons, all the royal members of the enemy's family, from their hair. Right here, he's holding them from their hair while they're trying to beg him not to. And he has a smiter in his hand. That's a very special ancient Egyptian smiter. It has a pin at the end, and then it has a spot where it has poison inside that little rounded thing. They dip it in poison, so when it sticks into the person, the poison goes into their blood and kills them. And right here, look how many heads he's holding and how they're begging, and he's showing how powerful he is. But it's extremely important to look at this to see how these faces look so different from all the other ancient Egyptian faces on purpose. You look at every ancient Egyptian face and they have the high cheekbone, like this. This is an ancient Egyptian face right here. He has the high cheekbones, he's beautiful, he's got this lovely glowing skin, he's very handsome. But then you look at the foreigners, the strangers, and they look different. All their features look different, their hairstyle looks different, and that's how they show you that they are actually strangers and not Egyptians. We still haven't reached my favorite part of the mythology of ancient Egypt, so let's keep going. Inside the temple of Karnak, they built so many different spots for so many different gods as dedication. One of the gods is Goddess Sekhmet. Goddess Sekhmet was the goddess of war. She was a lioness-shaped goddess, and she scared the Egyptians so much in real life and in wars. She was the goddess that is completely unpredictable. No one knew what this goddess was about to attempt or was about to do afterwards. She was known to have a really bad temper, and she was known to use her weapons, which consists of making the skies rain fire on the enemy, but she could use that anytime if she has a bad temper, even on the Egyptians themselves. They couldn't control her. They have stories that she would come out at night because she's angry, and she would kidnap people and eat them alive. They feared her so much that they decided there has to be a way to control her because they need her. Listen, they feared her so much, but they knew that the enemy would fear her so much too, and that she would destroy the enemy whenever she appears. So they decided there is one way to control that female goddess of Egypt. This might sound sexist because ancient Egyptians were absolutely sexist. But they said wine. Wine was the only way to control a female goddess of Egypt. And the stories go like this. They decided to make her a festival once a year, a big festival. And during that festival, they will make rivers of wine and let the goddess drink those rivers of wine. And starting that day, she should not stop drinking wine. Keep her so happy about herself. Keep her drunk, basically. And that's listed on the walls, that they will keep her drunk till they're ready, until they need her again to fight with them on their side. And that always happened on the temple that was dedicated to her. They would list those little things that explains exactly how they would sober her up and take her with them to war, and she never disappointed. Literally, they would say the skies would rain fire on their enemy. And that's the thing with ancient Egyptian mythology. The gods and the people and the kings sounded like they all mingled together, but they needed each other. And the gods weren't guilt-free. Gods made mistakes, humans make mistakes, gods were powerful. So it's like the Greek gods, Zeus, like Heracles, every one of them were mingling together. The gods would marry humans, and they would have kids with them, and those become the kings of Egypt. It's very similar to what the Greeks believed at the time as well. And that's why when the time came and Egypt fell apart at the end of the new kingdom, fell in the hands of the Persians for about 100 years, and then Alexander the Great came to Egypt. Alexander the Great himself built parts of this temple as well. He fell in love with the ancient Egyptian religion. He fell in love with Egypt. You ask anyone in Egypt, who was Alexander the Great? What was his nationality? And they will all say the same thing. He was Egyptian. We all know Alexander the Great is not Egyptian. Alexander the Great was Macedonian, the leader of the Greek Empire. But people in Egypt believe he's an Egyptian because he was treating Egyptians so well. He fell in love with Egypt. He wanted to be here. He wanted to be buried here. He promised the city he created, Alexandria, that he was going to go invade the world and come back here. Now, this place is sacred. This is where Goddess Sekhmet, the temple of Goddess Sekhmet, completely dedicated to Goddess Sekhmet. Here we go. Now we get in. Now today, the reason this temple is actually closed is because even today, people fear Goddess Sekhmet. And they made not just one door, a second metal door right here, so no one can go in, and so she doesn't come out. But it always is freaky a bit when you come in and finally manage to stare her in the eye and look at her, and she's standing there waiting to attack the next victim. It's quite eerie. She is the one that makes the sky rain fire to destroy the enemy. A lot of the gods were like that. They scared Egyptians, but when the time came, they needed to use them, and they did. Well, let's close back that door and make sure that she doesn't attack any of our friends or yourself. Let's go this way. ما سبته معلق اهو. He's worried about the key, saying we have to lock her in. This was Karnak Temple, and this is Karnak Temple today. It's a glorious temple that goes through centuries. Well, and you've done it again. Well done, well done, well done. You weren't killed by Goddess Sekhmet of war, and you didn't fear her. And you went through the 2,200 years of the Karnak Temple, starting of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt all the way through the New Kingdom and Alexander the Great. You went through the Botanical Gardens where new animals were found. You went through secrets inside of walls that were uncovered by earthquakes. You went through obelisks that are the largest in the world that also were a secret and uncovered by nature. You did it. Well done. Thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this trip and to take you to my favorite spots, secret spots that people fear in the temple. Thank you. I'm Ramy Romany, your iFit guide. Next, we're going to go into a different temple with a hidden mural behind the walls that you will absolutely love. Thank you.